Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Beginner's Guide to Installing Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. I'm Joe Collins, and if you're new to my channel and you don't know what we do around here, let me explain a little bit about that before we get rolling. I run a project called Easy Linux, and for the last several years I've been helping people get started with Linux, and I've worked with people all around the world. Now, usually we get folks started off with Linux Mint around here because it's just a super easy distribution for new users to settle into. However, lots of folks ask about Ubuntu. They want to learn how to use Ubuntu. Maybe it's something they're going to have to be using at work, or maybe they have a friend who uses Ubuntu and they like it and they want to learn how to do it. So in this video today, we're going to talk about installing Ubuntu. Regular old Ubuntu with the standard Ubuntu desktop, and we're going to look at Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. If you're brand new to Linux and you have never installed it anywhere before and you're a little bit unsure about how all of this works, I am really glad that you're here. I think this video is going to help you a lot. Just kick back, pause the video, go get yourself some popcorn and a beverage, and by the time this video is done, we will have installed Ubuntu. We're going to tweak it up a little bit. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks once you get it installed to make it more usable and to get you started off on the right foot. If you are somebody who is already familiar with Linux and you've installed it before, and this video might be a bit tedious for you, simply because of the fact that I'm going to take my time to cover it step by step. And we're going to explain everything as we go along. So this might take a little while, gang. But I have done these videos before for Ubuntu way back for 14.04 when it came along, and Linux Mint, and they have always been very helpful to people. So I have method to my madness. The first thing that we're going to talk about is what computer you're going to install Ubuntu on. The basic system requirements published by Ubuntu themselves, they say that you need to have a 2 gigahertz dual core processor at least. So that would be like an Intel Core Duo. Also, they say that the basic memory requirement is going to be 2 gigabytes. Yes, Ubuntu will run on a machine like that, but the only thing is it's going to be very slow and you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with it. I would say more realistically that the Ubuntu Desktop Edition 18.04 that is out now, you would really need to have 4 gigabytes of memory to make it work where you can do things with it. And then they go into talking about hard drive space requirements, and as far as video is concerned, you really need to you have to have an accelerated video card. You have to have something that can take up some of the slack as far as processing, rendering the GNOME desktop is concerned, to make the system run well. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty sluggish. But honestly, there are a lot of computers out there that fit the bill. And the one computer that you should not be installing Ubuntu on, or contemplating installing Ubuntu on as you watch this video, is the one that you use every day to get stuff done. We're going to make the assumption in this video that you are a Windows user. So if you use Windows for all of your daily stuff, the worst thing that you could possibly do is to just put Ubuntu on that machine, wipe out Windows, and then start from scratch, unless the system that you're using is really messed up and you're just totally at your wit's end. I would never recommend that you do that. What I recommend is that people who want to get started with Linux get a computer to make their Linux box. And there are a ton of refurbished laptops out there from companies like HP and Dell and Lenovo that will run Ubuntu just fine. And you can get them for pretty cheap. You can pick them up at secondhand shops. You can also get them at on eBay, Craigslist, all kinds of places like that. And they make a really good place to start. And then once you get familiar with using Ubuntu and Linux, and later on you can consider moving yourself over completely to an all Ubuntu environment. If you need Windows to play games that you have paid for, one thing that you can do is you can keep your Windows box as a game console. Just use it to play games and use Linux for everything else. If you are a Mac user, you can install Ubuntu on your Mac machine. It's a bit more of a complicated process. There are no guarantees as far as whether this is going to work perfectly. There's a lot of different hardware out there, and while Ubuntu does work on a very wide variety of hardware, there are a few things like some oddball Wi-Fi cards and stuff like that that it just simply doesn't work with very well. And as far as peripherals are concerned, if you have an HP printer, you're probably going to be okay. But if you have a printer made by anybody else, especially if it's an older printer, we're talking about going back to 2011 or something like that, you may find that that's not going to be supported on Linux, and that getting drivers going for that is going to be difficult. So I don't make any guarantees here, and if you're actually going to do this, you're proceeding at your own risk. Now, before we move on, there's one more thing that I want to talk about, and that is dual boots. I don't recommend dual boots for new users. Dual boots are really for people who understand how the partitions on the hard drive work, how a bootloader works, and they're ready to roll up their sleeves and get into the system and get dirty if something breaks. Dual boots can be very dangerous, and with Windows 10 in particular, they can be very difficult to set up and maintain. So if you've seen other people dual booting their systems and that's something that you want to do, I would recommend doing a lot of research first. But we're not going to be talking about doing dual boots in this video at all. I really think that the best experience that you're going to get is if you have a machine that is devoted to Ubuntu itself. And that way you can really learn the system. You can use a virtual machine. I will be using a virtual machine in this video today to show you the installation process. So if that's something that you'd like to do, you're very happy with your current setup, and you want to learn a little bit more about Ubuntu, you can install something like VirtualBox, or you can install something like VMware, and you can install it there, and that's a good place to learn the basics, but it's still not the same as having it installed on an actual computer that you use every day. It'll teach you the basics, but it doesn't show you the performance of the system, and it's not the same experience. Best way to go, get yourself a second machine. Could be an old desktop, could be a laptop that you pick up, and go for it. If you're going to buy new hardware, you're saying, okay, I'm going to buy a new machine that's going to be my Linux box, then I would strongly encourage you to buy one that is going to come with Linux installed. In the United States, that would be a company like System 76 or Dell. They sell machines that can come pre-installed with Ubuntu. You don't even have to go through this process. Just sit down and start using it. In Europe, there are companies that do that. Intraware is one of the companies that sells machines that come pre-installed with Linux, and you can do a little research online. Another company that sells laptops in particular that are ready to go for Ubuntu is Purism. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to go out and spend money for a machine that comes pre-installed with Windows, and then you are paying Microsoft for a license to run Windows, and if you're not intending to use it, then that just ups the price of the machine. Of course, Linux hardware, the hardware that's designed specifically for Linux, tends to be pretty high-end hardware and tends to be very expensive. So whatever you want to do is up to you. Now, the very, very latest machines might be a little bit iffy. They might be a little bit hard to get started. I've always found that you usually have the best time getting Linux installed on a machine that's like one generation back. And if you're just starting out and you're looking for hardware, those are all over the place and they're cheap. So get one of those, But do a little research first. And as far as installing on your particular machine, you can get a lot of information by just Googling something like install Ubuntu on Dell and then put in whatever make of machine you have. A lot of great information will pop up that way, so do your research. So we kind of know where we're going now, and we can get into the next step. And that will be creating a bootable media of some sort. And that would be a DVD or a USB stick. And before you do that, you will need to download an ISO image file. What's an ISO image file, you ask? It is a file that contains an image of some sort of block storage device, like a DVD, a CD, or a hard drive. And you can take these files and then you can create exact copies of those media. So in this case, we're going to be creating a DVD copy, but we can do a cheat and we can actually put that on a USB stick, so it will boot the computer from a USB stick as well. Now, which way you're going to go is going to depend on the computer you're using and how easy it's going to be for you to create this media. It gets really easy when you have something like Windows 7 and up, because all you got to do is put a blank DVD in the tray, as long as that's working properly, and then you double click on the ISO file and a box will come up and it will offer for you to just burn this to the disk. And you just basically say yes and click verify and go, and it just does it. So it might be easy for you to create a DVD if you have an older machine that has a DVD drive in it. A lot of newer machines don't these days, little laptops and things, but that's one way to go. It usually is a quicker installation and a little bit more reliable if you're going to be doing it from a USB stick. So look up the documentation, figure out how to boot up your computer from a USB, then come to this website here, and I have the link for this in the description of the video. I got a big cheat sheet in the description for the video, and this is here. And then all you got to do is, this is just Ubuntu.com, and then we came over here to downloads and chose desktop, and it brought us to this page. So we're just going to go ahead and download, and the one that we're interested in is Ubuntu 16.04. You might see links up here for other things. So that file is going to start downloading. Now, I actually don't need to download it because I already have it around. While you're here, you might want to throw them a donation. Ubuntu is provided absolutely free of charge, and you can donate to the nonprofit part of the canonical organization that makes Ubuntu freely available for everyone. Okay? And they have all kinds of little suggestions of how much you should put in there. So that would be a nice thing to do. And if you don't want to do that right now, that's fine too. All you got to do is come back later and you can donate directly to the project if you want to. So once the ISO file has downloaded, then you will need to create that media. I've already told you pretty much how to do that if you're going to be doing a DVD. If you're going to be making a USB stick, I have included here links to instructions on how to do that and what software you will need to do that for both Windows and Mac, because maybe you have a friend who has a Mac and they'll be kind enough to let you download the ISO file and put it on your USB stick there. So that is in the description for the video. This is also on the Ubuntu site, and it's a very good up-to-date guide on how to do this, and it is step by step. Yes, it is really 3:29 a.m. It's the perfect time to do something like this because it's quiet and there's no distractions, and the internet should be very fast because we're going to be doing some downloading as we roll on here. So we're going to actually do the installation in a VirtualBox VM. So on the list here, we're up to booting Ubuntu 18.04 for the first time. So you may have to turn off a thing called Secure Boot in your computer in order to make this happen. And that is a system that basically won't allow the machine to boot off of anything except the installed operating system. So you'll have to turn that off. And while you're there, you may want to look and see whether your machine will go into something called legacy mode, which turns off UEFI. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's just a system that has a little boot partition that lives on the hard drive, and that stores a lot of information about the operating system. And it can be a bit problematic sometimes with Linux, especially if later on you intend to do crazy things with your hard drive, like repartition it to add a separate home directory, something like that. We're not going to be getting into that in this video. But Ubuntu is completely compatible with UEFI if you want to leave that on for some reason. Maybe you want to leave your Windows Restore partition on the drive, that sort of thing, and it will work just fine. And you can follow along in the steps of this video and it will set itself up. But that is for more advanced users. We're going to assume that you've just turned off Secure Boot and you're ready to boot for the first time. So that's how we're going to deal with that in this video. We're also making the assumption that you have a computer that has one hard drive in it, and you are not worried about partitioning that drive in advance to have a local home partition or anything else special going on. We're just going to use one drive in the computer, and we're going to let the system automatically set that up. So let's go ahead and boot up for the first time. You can look up the documentation for your computer to see how that's done from a USB stick or a DVD. With most Dell machines, if you tap F12 during the boot process, when you see the Dell logo come up, it will bring up a boot menu, and then you just choose a DVD or a USB device. But that might vary depending on what computer you're on. I just had somebody the other day who sent me an email and said they couldn't get their computer to boot. And that turns out what it was. They just weren't familiar with the boot menu idea in Dell systems, because you really have to use the boot menu. You can go into the BIOS and set up the boot order, and it really doesn't care. You still have to use the boot menu. It's just a peculiarity with Dell. So let's go ahead and get booted up in our virtual machine. And we're going to be installing Ubuntu in a guest virtual machine on an Ubuntu host for this video, because that's what I'm running right now. Now, the way this works is that as we do this, when we get to places where the system is going to be munching and crunching and doing its own thing, then what we're going to do is pause the video to make it go a little bit quicker. So you won't have to just sit here and watch things crunch. Now, before we proceed any further, I should say that if you are going to be doing this on a computer that has information on it that you would like to keep, you need to do a backup first, and that involves copying all of the files that you have on that machine over to an external drive of some sort. That can be a USB stick or an external hard drive. You could even burn them to DVD if you want to go the old school route. It doesn't matter. You've got to get them off of that system. And you have to do it in a format that can be read by Linux if you want to restore that information back into the computer once we've installed Ubuntu. So don't use a commercial backup application. Do not use the Windows backup utility. That will get you in trouble. And yes, proceed at your own risk, as it says here in the notes, because once you do this, the only way that you're going to be able to get back to your old system is to reinstall Windows from scratch. There is no way to uninstall Ubuntu and start over. So let's go ahead and jump into getting this done. It's going to boot up and you're going to see something like this, and the first thing that you really ought to do is try Ubuntu. So we're going to try Ubuntu. And as soon as this loads up, we'll put it in full screen. Make it a little bit easier for everybody to see. I will be popping in and out of full screen as this video rolls on, because we're going to have to get to the information on that particular on the cheat sheet that is in the description for the video. So now that we're here, I'm going to jump into the settings real fast just to make it easier for everybody to see. And I'm going to go in here and go to Universal Access. So if you're like me and blind as a bat, it would certainly help if you can see. So we're just going to put that on large text. And once you have this desktop up and running, what you're in is a live environment, which means that you have a fully operational Linux system running on your machine. It is not installed yet, and anything that you do in this live environment is probably not going to be saved unless you got really fancy and created a USB stick with persistence. If you didn't do that and you don't know what I'm talking about, then what will happen is that whatever you do to this particular system is only going to last for as long as the machine is booted up. Once you turn it off, nothing's going to get saved. And this is a really great way to figure out whether Linux is going to work on your computer, because you can jump in here, and if your Wi-Fi card is recognized, then you should get something that says Wi-Fi is available. A little box will come up in the upper right hand corner here. In this case, because it's a virtual machine, it thinks it's a wired connection. If you don't get Wi-Fi working right off the bat, it just doesn't detect it. That doesn't mean that you won't be able to use Ubuntu. It just means you might have to install drivers for your Wi-Fi. Now, there are a few Wi-Fi cards still out there that Ubuntu doesn't work with, and no amount of fooling around or downloading or building drivers will make it happen. But they're becoming rarer and rarer and rarer. Most of the time, it just works right out of the box. And if it doesn't, there's a driver available. So you can, if it's not working, then you can go over to your Windows device and go over to your smartphone or whatever that you have available. Do a little research, find out what kind of Wi-Fi card you have in the system, and then see if drivers will be available. You can also check that out while you're here simply by going to Activities here and clicking on that, and then type in drivers. Let me try that one more time. I see what's going on. We'll have to pop out of that mode. We'll have to pop out of full screen mode because it doesn't seem to be that our keyboard is working in this virtual machine. Sometimes it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, so we'll just stay in, to avoid this happening, we'll just stay in this mode right here. It doesn't make any difference. I bet you it'll work now. That got me in the last video I did where I had a virtual machine up here. Anyway, so we go in and do drivers, and it will open up a program called Software and Updates, and then you can go to additional drivers, and it's going to search to see whether there are drivers available for this system. And it says that no drivers are available at this point in time, and that's fine. You have to have the internet hooked up for the system to be able to search for drivers as well. It will actually prompt us to install some drivers once we install the system. You'll see what I'm talking about. So once you've played around here and you are good to go, play a YouTube video, open up Firefox and do that. And if you get sound and moving video, you're probably going to be okay. So once you're ready to take the plunge, just click over here, and this will open the installer. Choose a language. English is okay with us. That's what we speak around here, but you can choose one that you speak, and Ubuntu is available in lots of different languages. And then you choose the kind of keyboard you have. We'll just go with US. And so you have some decisions to make here. You can do a minimum installation. A minimal installation, a lot of the software that comes pre-installed will not be installed. So if you want to build the system up yourself, this might be a good place to start. You can download updates while the system is installing. It doesn't download all of the updates, but it does get a lot of the base system updates while it's installing. So it makes it so once you boot the system, you have fewer updates to install and you can get using it faster. We're going to leave that on. And then down here, it's a box that you can check that will install third-party software. This will give you codecs that will allow you to play proprietary video formats and audio formats. And go ahead and check that. They have to do that for legal reasons. You have to be the person that says you're going to get it, because if there's a patent encumbered thing that you're downloading, then they just want to make sure that you are the person who's making the decision to do that. And Canonical, the company that distributes Ubuntu, is not distributing something that will break some sort of patent thing. That is for patent-encumbered software and proprietary software. So once we've made our decision, we're going to do a full installation. We're going to download the updates, and we're going to do the third-party software and move forward. and it's going to sit here and crunch for a little while, and it's going to analyze the system. Now, depending on what is on your hard drive, you might get different things here. This machine actually has an Ubuntu system already on it, and we're going to be replacing it. If your machine has Windows on it, it may offer to put Ubuntu alongside Windows. That's a dual boot setup, and like I said, unless you're really ready to learn about partitioning and bootloaders, I wouldn't go for that. We're just going to erase and install Ubuntu. We're going to let the system make the decisions about the partitions and everything all by itself. We're not even going to worry about that. A lot of people get all uptight about partitions, and especially if you have a solid state drive in your computer, then it kind of just makes sense to do it the way they're doing it these days. It creates one big ext4 partition, and Ubuntu does not create swap partitions anymore. It creates a swap file, which it puts in there. So just one big happy ext4 partition. And then it asks you about your time zone. So we're going to give it that information. And then it's going to ask for your name. You can put in your real name. I always do. Because for certain software like LibreOffice Writer, this will attach your name to it. So whatever you've got here, that's where that information is going to come from. And then you can name your machine. It will usually offer the brand and model of your machine. In this case, because this is VirtualBox, that's what pops up. And I'm just going to put in here Ubuntu VM. I mean, real creative. And you need to choose a username. Now, this has to be all lowercase. It usually will choose whatever the first thing is you put in name here. In this case, Joe is just fine. You can choose whatever you want there, just as long as it's all lowercase and there are no spaces in it. You can have a number in there, but that's the deal. So it can be letters and numbers, no spaces, all lowercase for the letters. And then choose a password. And for a password, you can put in whatever you want. I always recommend that you put in something short and sweet that you will be able to remember. You can confirm the password. And this is not a very strong password that I put in there, but it says pretty much anything that you put in there is a fair password. Now, one thing that I don't recommend that you choose is to log in automatically, especially if it's a laptop. You really want the system to prompt you to give it a password to log in. It's more secure that way. If somebody steals your system, somebody breaks in your house, you definitely want to have the system prompting you. So we just move on from there. And now we just watch the little slideshow that comes up and watch the installation process take place. Now for you, you're not going to see that because I'm going to pause the video and I will come back when it's done and it's time to restart the computer. The installation process is complete, and once it's done, you can go on and restart the computer. You'll be prompted to do that. Now, if for some reason while you were doing that, you got an error message or the machine locked up, or maybe you reboot the computer and it doesn't work, don't be afraid. Just do it again. So it will prompt you to remove your installation media. Just press enter on the keyboard to do that. Once you have done that, your DVD tray will open if you're using a DVD. It's a virtual machine here, so it doesn't do anything. So if it doesn't work the first time around for some reason, or if the machine locks up, you can hold down the power button for about 5 seconds, and that will turn it off. And then you can reboot it on Ubuntu once again, and just go through the process one more time. The installation process is rather complex, and every now and again the system misses a step or something doesn't get done properly and it doesn't work. Don't freak out. Just do it again. Now, if you do it again and you have the same error come up, then you may have a real issue to deal with. And at that point, you'll probably want to go off and see what's going on and find an answer. But in our case, everything went very smooth, and it only took a few minutes, as you can see by the clock up here. Now, how long it's going to take to get to this point on your system is really going to depend on your hardware, how fast that is, and how good of an internet connection you have, because as it's installing, it goes out and it gets some things off of the internet. So those two things in combination determine how quick it takes. A really long estimate would be an hour, and a really short estimate would be 5 or 10 minutes. So once we are here, all you have to do is click on your name and then put in your password, and you will be booted into your Ubuntu desktop for the very first time. And I have a list over here of all kinds of things that we're going to do now to kind of tweak the system up and make it a bit more usable. This is the tips and tricks section, because when you first boot it up, a lot of this stuff's not taken care of in Ubuntu. In Linux Mint, you tend to get more of a complete installation. There's a little bit less to do. So let's take a look at what we have here. Now we have the new Ubuntu welcome screen, so we'll go through that. And the first thing they do is give you a little guide about what everything does on the desktop, which is kind of cool. And then they're going to offer you the ability to set up live patch. Now, a live patch is a system where it will download and install updates in the background, and when those updates were installed, you should not have to reboot the system. I don't trust that completely, so we're going to leave that unset up. I think it's better to know when your updates are coming in and kind of watch it happen, and that's one of the first things that we're going to address once we get through this. The next thing that we have here is whether you want to send canonical information about your system setup. This caused a bit of a controversy. You may have seen some videos about it. I am not one of those people who think that Canonical overstepped the boundary by asking people to send information about their system. As a matter of fact, you can look at the report and it will tell you everything about the system that they're going to get. And you can go ahead and just choose yes or no here. In this case, I'm going to choose yes because it helps the developers to figure out exactly what kind of systems Ubuntu is running on. And they say you're all ready to go here, and then they show you some of the software that's available for the system. But before we jump into looking at software, there's a few things that I add on to the list before I say you're completely ready to go. So if everything works the way it's supposed to and your internet connection carried over, then you will see this box come up. And here is where you can install your updates. And before we get into that, I'm going to jump into the settings because I want to change something. And actually what I need to do here is go ahead and make this bigger. So I'm going to once again go to Universal Access, and I'm just going to choose large text. Yeah, that makes things easier for everybody to see. So we can go back over here. So we went into settings here, and that's where we are. And here is the, wait a minute, I didn't do anything yet. Here is what I usually do when I jump in here. The first thing that you're going to want to do is on updates. I like to have it display immediately, but I don't want it to download things in the background or install anything without me knowing about it. It's just a little bit of a paranoid thing, because sometimes on a rare occasion an update can break your computer. It can cause a problem, and if you don't know what update that is and you don't know when it came in, it can make it harder. So I like to see that. And basically the updates are divided into security updates, which are things that you need immediately. This is the reason why you don't need to run antivirus software on your computer, is because anytime a vulnerability is found, it's immediately patched, which keeps bad people from getting into your system. So you really want the security updates installed as soon as you get them. And then other updates you can opt to have it display weekly. So I put it on display immediately for both, and I have it checked for updates daily. So once that is set, we're going to jump over here to Ubuntu software, and we're going to change our mirror to a local mirror. See, it's on the list here. So let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, you kind of have to know what mirrors that you're looking for. So if you do a search for Ubuntu local mirrors, a mirrors list will pop up, and you can look at this in Firefox to choose one that's close to you. I happen to know that James Madison University is very close to me, And that particular mirror is right here. You see it's mirror.jmu.edu. And what these are it's where all of the software that you can download from the main repositories for Ubuntu, it's stored on these mirrors all around the world. So if you choose one that's close to you, you'll get a fast connection and a more reliable connection instead of trying to pull all this stuff down from halfway around the world. So that's what we're going to do there. Now we have other software. You may or may not want to do this. I always go ahead and opt to get software from canonical partners because that's where some third-party stuff may come in. And then while you're here, you can also look at additional drivers, see if there's anything available for your system. It's saying that no additional drivers are available for this. It's a virtual machine, but I do have some drivers that are available, and I'm going to install them manually here shortly. So once you have done that, you can go ahead and close here, and it's going to you definitely want to reload because you have changed your mirrors. And before you move on, don't install the updates yet because it might get very angry at you and be like, well, I can't find where to get the stuff from. And what this is doing is it's just downloading information from the mirrors. And this might take a few minutes to do. If for some reason it doesn't do it, then you can go back and switch the mirrors again. But I have not had too much trouble with these particular mirrors. So you can see if you click on details, you get a list of everything that it's looking for. All the stuff that's coming down, and it's done. So now you can go on and install your updates. So we'll choose install now. I clicked up here and it jumped over. That's why it disappeared there for a second. So we've already installed some of the updates automatically during the installation, but there are some that need to be installed, so we'll go ahead and let that do that. And this can take a little while to do, so I'm going to go ahead and let this do this while the video is paused, and we'll come back when it's done. It's kind of cool if you click on details while the updates are installing. It will go ahead and download everything, and then we'll open up this window here and it will show you everything that it's doing. And I remember when I first started using Linux, I always used to love to watch this operation, and I didn't know what any of this stuff was flying by, but it was really kind of neat to watch. So if this is taking a little while, at least they give you a little show if you click on details there. Okay, that's all done, and that can take a little time, and once again, it depends on how fast your hardware is and how fast of an internet connection you have. In my case, what did that take? 5-10 minutes, something like that? Now, once it's done, before you do anything else to the computer, you want to make sure that you restart it at this point, because you want to make sure that all of those updates get to take effect. And now the next thing that you're going to want to do is install your drivers. Once you've done your updates, this is the time to install your drivers. Now, if you've done that already, then it probably won't hurt anything, but I like to do the updates first before I install drivers in the system. Now, because this is a virtual machine, it's not telling me that I have any drivers to install, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually install the drivers for VirtualBox, because we're going to need to copy and paste some text over, and those drivers have to be in there to make that happen. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that in this video, even though probably a lot of you won't be using VirtualBox, but it'll give you some idea if you are using VirtualBox of how that is done. So we log back into the system, and we're going to get our desktop back here. And I'm going to go to Devices, and I'm going to insert the disk image. And I'm going to tell it to go ahead and run when it prompts me. So it's automatically going to run the software on the disk. It'll ask for my password. It's one of the beautiful things about Linux is that really anytime that you're going to change the system, it's going to ask you for your password. Get used to that. Make sure that you choose a password that's going to be easy to remember, because you're going to be putting it in a lot. So it says it is, let's see. Oh, okay, so I had a bit of an issue here. I've got to install the GCC in order to do this. Let's see, virtual guest editions, running kernel modules. All right, well, let me go ahead and pause the video, and I will take care of that and come back when I'm done. Or do you want to see that? You guys want to see that? Okay, let's go ahead and we'll show you how to do that. So what I need to do is install a couple of things to make this work, and I'm going to go ahead and eject this disk. And let me open up a terminal here. So what I need to do is install sudo apt install, and the package that we need is let's see, it's build essential. Yep, that's it. Now what I did there, for those of you who are new to Linux, is that I typed in most of what I needed, and when I thought that I had enough to be unique, I just hit the tab key and it auto-filled for me. Makes it real easy to work in a terminal. We're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here, but I want you guys to see how this actually works. So let's go ahead and install this stuff. And essentially what I need to do in order to put the drivers that I need to make this work in here is to give the system the tools to actually build the packages. Fun, right? So while this is installing, I'll go ahead and pause. Okay, that is all installed. So let's reinsert the disk. Yes, we're going to go ahead and run. Yeah, now it should have no problem actually building the drivers that we need for the system. This is the reality of setting up Ubuntu. Those of you who have watched my videos where I have done the setup of Linux Mint probably are saying, boy, I mean, this is getting difficult already. The honest truth about Ubuntu is that it requires some fiddling to get it going. It is more of an enterprise-grade desktop these days. Those of you who are from the older days, you know, when Ubuntu first started out, when they had the Linux for human beings thing. It's always been this way, of course, but it requires some fiddling to get going. This is the way Ubuntu is. So it is now currently building the modules for the kernel. And once it's done, all I should be, now I should have to just restart the machine. And our drivers should be up and running. We'll also get accelerated video. Now you guys raised your hands and you said you wanted to see all this, so that's why the video is running long. It's totally your fault. Me getting these drivers going, you know, hey. So don't complain if the video's long, man. I saw all those hands get raised out there. I did. Okay. All right, here we go. Get back to our desktop. Then we can move on to more things on the list. I really needed to get those installed so I could copy and paste from the thing here and put it in. Make it a lot easier. It'll go faster. So now we are back to our desktop, and while that is getting itself situated, let's see what we have next to do. So the next thing that we want to do is install this lovely tool called the GNOME Tweak tool. It's really important that you have this installed on your computer, because if you want to change things about your desktop, you have to have it around. And so I'm going to open up a terminal. Now in Ubuntu, to open up a terminal, Ultimate Control and T is the shortcut to do that. And we can actually make that a little bigger and easier to see, because we're going to be working in a terminal quite a bit here. So let me see if pasting this in is going to work. Yeah, it pasted something, but it didn't paste what I wanted to paste. Hold on. Let me go back over here and copy it. This is one of those VirtualBox features that is just really good to have if you're doing a lot of testing. So let's go ahead and install that. Anytime you install anything, it asks for your password. Okay, so we have the tweak tool. And then we can go and configure the desktop. And I can show you how that works. So we're going to click on Activities up here. You can also come down here and click on all the programs. Let's do that so you guys see that. Go to All, and we just installed Tweaks. So it should be Summer's here on this here list. And there it is right there. I'm going to open that up, and now we have all kinds of different things that we can do. We can play with the desktop, we can play with the theme here, we can decide what shows up on our desktop. So for instance, I don't need trash on my desktop. Matter of fact, on Ubuntu, I don't need anything on the desktop, but I do like to have the mounted volumes show up, so I leave it as an active desktop. You can change your fonts here, and they're scaled to 1.25. Now, one of the downsides of the Ubuntu, well, it's actually a GNOME desktop thing, it's not just Ubuntu, is that if you make your fonts over a certain thing, then automatically you have the accessibility menu that shows up, where you can turn things on like zoom and other things as well. So we're going to leave it where it is. If you make them a little bit smaller, it might turn it off, but you can change things about the fonts here. There's all kinds of goodies, and we'll talk more about extensions here in a little bit. There's some things that you need to do to take advantage of GNOME extensions in Ubuntu. So we have GNOME Tweaks installed. We can configure the desktop. We're going to leave it the way it is for right now. That's fine. And the next thing that we really ought to do is set up a program called TimeShift. Now, this is a program that is just baked into Linux Mint 18.3, and the new version of Linux Mint 19 is going to have this as well. And it has become really quite useful. It is a kind of a backup application, but it's not a backup application. I'll show you what it does here. So let's go ahead and copy that URL, and we're going to put that in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a PPA to do this. This is a private package archive, which is maintained by the developer of TimeShift. So if you're going to be working with Ubuntu, this is one of the things you're going to have to learn about is PPAs. So I put the command in there, and it goes out and it adds it. And it didn't ask for my password because I just put my password in. There's a timer on that. So when you put your password in the terminal and you approve something and you come back and do something again, as long as it's within that time, which is about a minute or 2 minutes or something like that, then it won't prompt you again. So now what we need to do is install TimeShift, and I'll just type this in. Did I get that right? Yep, I did. And it's a really small program, so it'll only take a second to install. Now what TimeShift does is it lets you set restore points for your Ubuntu system. Now we're not talking about your personal data files. There's already a program here to do that called Backup that you can configure, and you can set up backups to stuff in the cloud if you want to with that particular program, or you can use an external hard drive. Those of you who have been following Easy Linux for a long time know that I have a program that I've written called XBT, and if you go to easylinux.com, and the link will be in the description, you can look at that on the bash scripts page. You might want to use XBT. It's a pretty cool program, but you can use backups in here. This program is a program that takes snapshots of the system, and we're talking about the operating system itself, and it'll let you restore it. You can go back to a former state. So if you're used to using System Restore on Windows, for instance, it's the same kind of thing, and it works really well. So getting TimeShift set up is super easy. Just type in time, and we will open this up. And we just go through the process here. And this is a virtual machine which has a pretty small hard drive in it, so I probably shouldn't do this. So I'm actually not going to activate it, but I'm going to just go through the steps anyway. So the first thing that you would want to choose is, well, actually in this case, Ubuntu uses ext4 for its file system, so it's definitely, that's the only setting that you can use. And now it's going to go out and it's going to look at the drive to see where you can put it. In our case, we're only going to have one choice because there's no other drives hooked up to the system. You can set TimeShift up to use an external drive, and it will pretty much activate when that drive is plugged in, but I'm not really sure how that works because I've never done it that way. I usually create a snapshot on one of the local drives here. So in this case, this is what we got. So we'll go forward and we'll go to next. And here what I usually do is I schedule it to do just what is here, because this is what they call an M+1 backup. That's 2 monthlies, 3 weeklies, and 5 dailies. And one of the really interesting things about TimeShift is that you might think, oh my God, that's going to create a whole bunch of backups. And how big is the system? Well, with Ubuntu, it's running about 12 gigabytes these days. And you're going to say, that's just going to suck up a lot of hard drive space. No, actually what it does is it creates a link farm. So the backup, the snapshots don't really take up all that much space on the drive. Now there are some downsides to creating a link farm, which means it really only copies the file once, and then it creates a link if the copy stays the same, if the copy of that file stays the same for each snapshot. Now I might be talking a little bit over some people's head, but don't worry about that. You can still use the program. It's quite easy to use. The main point is it doesn't take up a huge amount of disk space. So anyway, you can. I would do this M+1 backup here, where it's 2 months, 3 weeks, and 5 days. So if we go forward here, we're good and we're set up. So I'm not. This is what it looks like, and it will create a restore point. You can do it manually. You can add comments to it. Very cool system. I do have a video up on my channel that is devoted specifically to TimeShift. You may want to check that out yourself. So now that TimeShift is set up, we can move on. Now that will automatically take those snapshots in the background. You don't have to fuss with it anymore. If you want to install the Google Chrome browser, then I have a link here to that, and we're not going to do that in the video. Or do you want to? Do you want to see me install Google Chrome? We're going to do it the easy way. We're going to do it graphically. So let's go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and make a copy here, and we'll copy this link and open up Firefox in Ubuntu. We're just going to do it this way. There are several ways to install Google Chrome, and it's taking a little while for Firefox to load in this here virtual machine. That's all right. We can go ahead and close that. I just want to get here, and we'll paste this in here. We'll paste. And should take me straight to it. I'm going to download Chrome. We definitely want the 64-bit deb package here. That's what you want to choose. And then you accept and install. It's not really going to install it, because what I want to do is save the file. And it will install that. It will download that. And I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit so I can show you another piece of software that I recommend. So I'm going to come down here to my recommended software. And it's on this list here. So let me go ahead and copy this. So let's go in here, get back to our terminal. So sudo apt install. Let's just go ahead and put this stuff in here. Okay. Whoop, I doubled it up. We don't need to do that. Take that out of there. Here we go. Okay, off we go. So while it's downloading, we can go ahead and install this few pieces of software. Stuff's really small, so it shouldn't take very long. And I think our download is complete. Now, in this recommended software here, there is a package called gdebi, which is the one that I'm going to use to install Google Chrome. If you install a deb package for Ubuntu, then it's kind of like an exe package for Windows. You double click on it and it'll install it. And the way it is set up is it uses the software application here to do that, and it works just fine. But I happen to like this little gdebi package, and as you get more used to using Ubuntu, I really like to use gdebi from a command line. So that's why I have it on my recommended programs list. So where did that download to? Well, it should have went into downloads. So let's take a look here. I'll go to downloads. I'm going to right click here and see if I just double click it now, it would open with software. But I'm going to use another application, and I am going to choose GDebi. I just double clicked on that. And GDebi is just a really nifty little piece of software to have around. And I'll show you the other software at the end of the video, but I wanted to jump ahead and get this. So now it checks it out to make sure that it's okay. We're going to install the package. GDebi will warn you if a deb package doesn't, for some reason, work with the current version of Ubuntu, and that can happen sometimes. Do be careful when you're downloading deb packages from the web. Make sure that you trust where that package is coming from, because, hey, you can put malware on your computer this way if it's a bad deb package. There's not a whole lot of them out there, but it is a possibility, so I have to point that out. So that's how you install Google Chrome, for those of you who want it. Go ahead and automatically close. And now it's going to scan to make sure everything went okay, and then we've got that confirmation, so we're good to go. So if we want to start using Google Chrome, then all you got to do is come here to Activities, or look under Software, type in Google, and we can go ahead and open it up. And of course it's going to take it a little while to load. While it's doing that, we can also do this. Let's just open up the software and find Google, and then what we're going to do is right click and add it to the favorites so it shows up over here on the dock. By the way, in the settings you can go in here and you can resize this dock, and I'll put it in there. So it should have opened up in the background. Using the escape key to get out of that mode. No, I don't think it opened up. Let's click on it again. Is it going to be a pain? It's going to give us a bunch of trouble, isn't it? It's going to be a problem because we're running in a virtual machine and we're recording a video. I bet you anything that's why it's being the way it is. So let's look at our list here and let that cook for a little while. Where were we? We did jump ahead. So we installed Timeshift. We put in Google Chrome. So the next thing that we want to do is I want to see why Google Chrome isn't loading up here. Or maybe, there we go. That's why. Duh. It was hiding. It was hiding, man. One of the cool things that you can do is go to Activities. And you see it shows you what's on your desktop for that particular desktop. So I should have went ahead and did that. We want to make Google Chrome the default, and I don't want to automatically send stuff back to Google. You can do that if you want to. And now Google Chrome opens up, and it will prompt you to sign in if you have a Google account. So that's how that works. Just got a little confusing there for a second. Go ahead and close that. Of course, this is a virtual machine with 2 gigabytes of memory, so Google Chrome tends to take up a lot of memory. So let's go ahead and close that. There we go. Okay, we can pick up where we were. So what's the next thing that we're going to do on the list? Oh, that's right. Now, we're going to install a package called Ubuntu Restricted Extras. And I cleared that screen using the Control key and the letter L. That works in most terminals. So we want to install this package. And yes, you can get this software that I'm installing. Most of it you can get in the software application. It's just easier to give you the commands to put in to get things set up. So sudo apt install Ubuntu Restricted Extras. Did I spell that correctly? I certainly hope so. Well, yes, it says I did. And this goes out and gets a lot of goodies for your system. It'll get you some new fonts, Microsoft TrueType fonts. It's the only Microsoft product that I will install on an Ubuntu system. So once you do this, it's going to give you this message. Just use the tab key to select OK, and then use the arrow key to select yes, and then just continue. And it's going to go out and set all this up. Now, once this is set up, we're actually going to remove one of the packages that it installs right here. And the reason why we are going to remove that package is because it is an MP3 codec from a company called Fluendo that basically makes your MP3s sound bad, so that you will go to them and buy the quote-unquote improved codecs from them. And the last time I looked, the price on that was about $35. Now, Ubuntu puts that in there for legal reasons, because even though MP3 is technically out of patent now, so you could say that it's kind of open source, there are still some countries that have laws on the books that say that you have to pay for patent encumbered codecs like that, and that's why they do that. Now, you don't actually need to have that. All you really need to do is to remove this codec, and then the free and open source GStreamer codecs will kick in, and things will sound the way they're supposed to. This is something they started with Ubuntu 14.04, and I remember for the longest time I couldn't figure out, is like, why does anything that's an MP3 sound awful? So if you have MP3 music, this is something you want to do. So I'm just going to paste that in, and it's sudo apt remove this particular application, GStreamer 1.0-fluendo-mp3. So we'll go ahead and take that out of the system. So what do we have next on the list? We want to install a package here called GNOME Tracker. Now, what this does is it's a feature of the GNOME desktop that keeps a running database of the files on your computer, and it makes file operations go faster in the Nautilus file manager here. So this is Nautilus, and certain things that you might want to do in Nautilus, like a mass rename or something, will go easier if you have this set up and running. Ubuntu does not have it running in their version of the GNOME desktop, simply because of the fact that it does give you a little bit of a performance hit, but it's nice to have it around. So we'll go ahead and install that. I'll just type that in, sudo apt install tracker. We'll get that started. So it should start itself up and get itself running automatically once you install that. It's really quite a small program. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space, but occasionally you might see its process running in the background. And finally, the last thing that I want to do is I want to show you how to get the search option to work. Okay, if you go into settings, let's go to settings, and we're going to look in search here. Look at search right here. You can see that we can have the system search for things when we type them in the activities menu. When we go to activities and we type in there, it can look for files and stuff. So it'll look in Ubuntu software, it'll look for terminal commands, it'll look for stuff in your calendar if you have that set up, passwords and keys, and in your files. But when you first install Ubuntu, it doesn't work. And you might import some files in there and then try and get it to run, and you're like, well, what's going on? It took me a while to figure out why this was doing this when Ubuntu switched over to the GNOME desktop. By the way, if you come in here and go to setup, you can add more stuff. So you can if you have other places you'd like to have it look, then you can add folders. So let's say that we want to have it look, well, we don't have a snap folder in here, but if we did, then we could have it look in extra places, and that's where you do it. Oh, well, we can create a place for it. Let's create a folder. Well, it's not going to let me do it from here, so let me get out of that. Okay, hold on. Let's do this. This will be fun. Go to Files, and I'm going to right-click and I'm going to create a new folder, and we'll just call it bin. I always create a folder called bin anyway. That's where all my little scripts and things go. Now, if you're brand new to Linux, you don't know what that's about, you might want a bin folder at some point. Let's put it that way. It's short for binary. Okay, so now that I've created that, I should be able to add that manually to the list over here. We got desktop that's already on. So, yeah, we can have it look in bin. Just open that up and say OK. And there, we've added it to the list. So anyway, this feature doesn't work immediately. There is a database on every Linux system that works with a command that you run in a terminal called locate. And locate is a quick way of finding files on the system. And it creates a database in the background. And it does that once a day automatically, usually about 5 minutes after you boot up the machine on Ubuntu. That's when it's set up to do it. So it does it every single day. If the machine runs 24 hours a day, then it'll do it about 7:30 in the morning. And for those of you who kind of know what I'm talking about, yes, that's an anacron function. So the first day that you install this, you might dump a bunch of files in the machine, and you might go in here and you might go searching for them, and you put your file name in, file name, and nothing pops up. You get absolutely nothing. Searching, and it comes up with nothing. Well, in this case it did, because it comes up with stuff out of Ubuntu software, but your files don't show up. So what you need to do if you want to get that working immediately is to run this command, sudo update db. It is that simple. It is just this little command. And what this will do is it will update the system's file database, and it shouldn't take long for it to do it here. And then when you are searching for files, they should show up. So that's how that works. It took me forever to figure out what was going on there. Some people said that you had to install Tracker to make that happen. No, you don't have to install Tracker. I like to install Tracker for Nautilus to make some of those operations go faster. But that's pretty much it. Now finally, let's look at some of the software that I had you installed here. And this is just on my recommended list. I've got a couple of applications. The first one is HTOP. HTOP is a wonderful piece of software, and it gives you an overview of what your system is doing, and it also allows you to interact with processes that are running. So this is sort of like a system monitor. I can't remember what they call this in Windows, where you can see things that are running. GNOME has one called System Monitor that's already in here. So you can see individual processes and you can kill them. And the documentation for HTOP is very straightforward and easy to read. You might want to check that out. But it gives you an overview of exactly what your system is doing, and gives you useful information like uptime. So as you get more and more familiar with Linux, the usefulness of HTOP will become very apparent to you as you use it more and more. So we use Q to get out of that. The next piece of software on my recommended list is GW. Now I've already shown you that. So let's take a look at Synaptic. And that's a graphical application, so we'll just do a search for that. And it pops right up. Now, this is a more advanced way of working with the programs on your Ubuntu computer. Make sure I type that in properly. Synaptic Package Manager lists all of the programs that are available in whatever repositories you have hooked up, and it gives you all kinds of options. So let's do a search. It'll even find things that you downloaded and installed. So if I put in Goog and I search for that, it should take me to pretty close to Google Chrome. Let me give it a little bit more to work with instead of scrolling through that big long list, Joe. I see it's going to be a big pain in the butt about it. But I still found it anyway. It was not a good example, I don't think. Let's try something else. Okay, search for HTOP. There it goes. Went straight to it. I would actually have to put in Google Chrome stable for that to find that directly. So if we wanted to reinstall HTOP, for instance, we could find it here, and we could mark it for reinstallation or removal or whatever, and you can do a whole bunch of packages at once, and you can search through the repositories. There's like 60,000 applications in here. So just to give you an idea of how it works, we will reinstall HTOP. Yes, click that to automatically close. It'll actually show you what it's doing while it's doing it. Open up a little terminal there. Great application. It's been around forever. Unfortunately, it stopped shipping in Ubuntu several years ago. Linux Mint users, you guys know it's already there. Now, another great way to browse software in Ubuntu is to use the software application itself. And this is not a bad application, gang. It just doesn't show you every package that's available in the system. And I like to have Synaptic around to, kind of show me all of that kind of stuff. So what else do I have on my list? I think that I asked you to install NetTools. Now, the reason why that is here is because when you are trying to work with the internet and your local network on your system, you're going to see a lot of documentation out there that's going to point you to a command called ifconfig. ifconfig. And if you do not have a NetTools installed on Ubuntu, you will not get this command to work. See, this gives you all of the information about your network. They have moved on to a different command called IP. And to get this roughly the same information, you put in this IPADDR, which is short for address, and this is what it gives you. So they both kind of do the same thing. The thing is that the bulk of the documentation about working with networks, if you need to dig into your system to set up a network or do things like that, they tell you to go to ifconfig. So that's why I had you install that. And there are some other tools that are in the NetTools package that are really good to have around. Of course, if you're going to be a casual desktop user, you may not use any of this software, but it's something that I like to use all the time. So that's basically it. You have a fully functional Ubuntu system. It's up and running. Go ahead and once you've done all this goofing around with the system, restart it, customize it, make it your own, explore, play with it. There is really not a whole lot here that you can point and click to that would break the system. Some of the quick settings that I will show you that I like to do. First of all, the system comes out of the box with the dock set up to be pretty big. You can make that smaller if you like. You can also change where that shows up. So if we make that like 32, then you end up with what I have on my main desktop here. And you can auto hide the dock if you want to, make it go away. So that's here. If we go down to privacy, this has the screen lock on, which means that after a certain amount of time, the screen will lock itself. You may want to turn that off. I usually don't use that. I have the screen go blank. And then I go down to the power settings here. And in the power settings, you can set when your screen goes blank, 15 minutes. You can set automatic suspend up. And usually the way that works is that the system will blank the screen, and if you hit the space bar or jiggle the mouse, it'll come back up, and all you have to do is, you go right back to your screen. But if it goes to sleep when it wakes up, then it will prompt you for a password, which is the way I like to do it. So there's a ton of settings in here. There's a ton of things that you can look at. Let's take a quick look at details, which is actually kind of important. Here's where you can play around with date and time. You can set it to a normal clock, so it's not a 24-hour clock. I like an AM/PM clock, for instance. Here's where you can tweak your user account. You can choose an avatar. You can upload an image to do this as well. You can take a picture of yourself if you have a webcam. Whatever you want to do is fine, or you can just leave it blank. I just don't like ever looking at Mr. Nobody. So we'll choose the little bike there. And then here you can choose the default applications. Rhythmbox is for music. I usually like to just go ahead and set this to videos if it's going to let me do it. There we go. Okay. I don't know what that was going on. Something with a virtual machine. And that way, when you click on a music file or an audio file of some sort, it just opens up a player and plays it, and it doesn't throw it into Rhythmbox. But if you're going to be collecting, putting music on your system, you have a MP3 collection, you're going to be putting some of it in here. It's a great program to use to organize your stuff. Love Rhythmbox to death. So that is the basic Ubuntu setup. Have fun, explore, get online, learn more about it, play with it, break it. This one of the advantages of having it on another computer that you don't have to use daily is the fact that if you completely break this, and you can just format and reload and start over. In the Linux community, that is affectionately known as borking up your system. All right, so there you go. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you found it useful. This was a rather informal video. It was a very real look at what it takes to set up an Ubuntu system, and I hope that it makes you feel a little bit more confident about doing so yourself. And if you do, put a comment in here. Let me know how it goes. Become part of the Easy Linux community. As always, your feedback is welcome. Please be sure to give Easy Linux a like on Facebook if you are a Facebook user. Check out Easy Linux on the web at easylinux.com, and check out freedompenguin.com for more about Linux from contributors such as myself. Freedom Penguin is a project run by Matt Hartley, and it has become quite the interesting clearinghouse for information about Linux for average Linux users, people who use it every day and use it at home just to get things done. So do check that out, and thank you once again for watching.